Okay, welcome back, Year 5. We were reached at the end of Chapter 3, Part 1 of Cosmic, and we know that Liam had just experienced a ride with his dad, and he was the only one from his class to actually get on the ride because he's quite tall. So we reached the part where as the children were leaving the exit for school parties, the man at the exit, the guard at the exit, thought that Liam was a grown-up because he tells Liam to use the main exit. He thought I was a grown-up. People always think I'm older than I am, but no one had taken me for an actual grown-up before. I could have said, I am a school kid. Please let me out. Or I could have said nothing and seized the opportunity to have another go on the cosmic. So I did have two options, but somehow in my head they dwindled down to one. I went straight back to the cosmic. The man in charge spotted me hanging around and said, Didn't your mate like it? My mate? I realized he was talking about my dad. You know, you can do me a favor if you like. Help me plug the gaps. What gaps? Well, I like to keep the ride busy. It doesn't look too tempting. The cage just standing there. A lot of people chicken out at the last minute. I like to have someone who can step in from time to time. So the person running the ride wants Liam to be this extra person who goes on the ride. So the ride looks really busy and it looks very popular and more people want to go on it. I said, sure, in a grown-up kind of voice and stood by the cage. That afternoon, I did the cosmic with a boy whose mum was too scared to take him, a teenager who was doing it for a dare, someone whose girlfriend was too fat for the seat, and 4 others. 8 goes in all. The man said I must have a highly developed centre of gravity. Every single time I got the same crispy new world feeling. It never wore off. According to the man, the cosmic generates 4G on the way up. That's 4 times the gravitational force exerted by the Earth. 4G is enough to make you appreciate how comfy normal gravity is. I used to have it set at 5G, but people kept passing out, which wasn't good for business. You do have to feel sorry for anyone who lives on a high gravity planet all the time. That must be really hard work. Afterwards, the man bought some hot dogs and chips and we ate them in the cage, dangling gently from a piece of elastic high above the fig. You could see all the rides laid out like a model village, and sometimes a seagull went right past us. Finally, I spotted Dad walking quickly past the funhouse. I shouted, taxi, taxi, which usually works. He looked everywhere but up. It was ages before he saw me. I suppose if you're looking for me now, Dad, you're doing the same thing. Looking everywhere but up in space. It was a laugh watching you then, but when we got back to the ground, you weren't amused. Where the hell have you been? We counted you out of the exit. People swore they saw you on the bus. We were halfway to Bootle before we realized you went with us. I've been here. I was here the whole time, wasn't I, mister? Yeah, said the man in charge. And what's your problem anyway, mate? I'm not your mate. I'm his dad. You look a bit young to be his dad. He's 11. What? He's just unusually tall. It's not his height, it's his beard. That was the first mention of the premature facial hair. And Dad said, Liam, coach. Everyone cheered and clapped when I finally got on the coach. I sat by the window and tried to get a look at my new facial hair reflected in the glass. I could just make out little wisps of brown candy floss. I said, how did they get here? Do you think the extra gravity might have squeezed them out of my face? Randomly, this made Dad really furious. Liam, blah, blah, looking for you for the past 2 hours, blah, blah. Had every taxi driver in the country looking for you. Reported your magical disappearance from a moving bus. I wasn't on the bus. Your magical disappearance from a moving bus to the police. No. And then I find you cheerfully waving and eating chips on a fairground ride. How do you think I feel about that? Happy that I'm alive? He glared at me and said, possibly in some remote and noble corner of my heart, yes, but mostly no. I said, I'm sorry. Then he said, you should know better, a big lad like you. So it's interesting that Liam calls out taxi because remember, we know that his dad is a taxi driver, which is why he probably told all his colleagues about his son missing. And that's why he shouted taxi, taxi. It's probably code. So Liam narrates further on. That's the thing about parents. If you go missing, they worry that you might be dead. Then, when they find you, they want to kill you. Dad was furious because while he'd been worrying himself sick, I hadn't been worried at all. Why wasn't I worried? Because I knew he'd come back for me. I never thought for a moment he wouldn't. When you're a kid, you think your dad can do anything. It's different now. If you ask me now if I think Dad is going to pop up at the controls of this rocket 200,000 miles above the surface of the Earth and fly us back to Bhutto, I'd say probably not. I suppose that means I'm not a kid anymore. So the narrative keeps shifting. Yes, Liam is kind of in a flashback telling us what happened the first time he rode on Cosmic, but then there are parts when he as a narrator is talking back from the rocket, because remember, right at the beginning of the book we know that he's up in space. Okay, that is the end of chapter 3. In the next video I'll be reading part 1 of chapter 4.